Hello and welcome to GEOSCOPE on Labour Social. I'm Graham Hughes up here. Hello, I'm Graham Hughes, and down there is Ollie Bowler Hatman. How you doing, Ollie?
I'm
My
all
name
right,
didn't
thank
come
you.
up. Why did my name come up? I'm a bit upset about that.
Nope.
Never mind. Anyway, so we have got a lot to talk about this week.
Yeah.
Where do you want to start? Do you want to start? Do you want to start here and then head over to Canada and then go to Alaska? I'm just thinking like geographically.
Um. Yeah. Let's start in Canada, shall we? Because
Canada,
that was interesting.
cold Australia. Let's start in cold Australia. So yeah, we've had our Brexit negotiations nipped in the bud because we had this agreement with
Oh.
Canada, which meant that we kept us the rules and things that we had when we were in the EU, but that deal ran out in December, and so now we need a new deal, but it's all over cheese apparently.
Yep.
Ollie,
Cheese and beef.
cheesy beef.
Yep.
So what happened? What happened?
So this was one of those things where we were warning about this in 2016 that trade deals are really difficult to do. You know,
Yes,
who'd have
and
thought?
they take a very long time as well.
Yeah. I mean, you do not normally sign a trade deal like as fast as we have signed trade deals with like New Zealand and
Not
Canada.
not if you want them to be any good.
Yeah.
Yeah,
An average time for a trade deal is about 8 to 10 years. Like
yeah.
that is normally the average time a trade deal actually gets signed. 2 years, that's a bit out of nowhere. And of course, the Australian trade deal, the New Zealand trade deal are
Rushed
absolutely
through.
shocking.
Yeah, dreadful. Well, they're
Especially,
not for Australia or New Zealand. They're
oh yeah,
really
not
good
for them.
for them. But yeah, I learned a long time ago. If you want something done fast and dirty, it's going to cost you more money. If you want to
Mhm.
be slow and take your time about it, it's gonna be better in the long run. But they needed a quick Brexit win, so we didn't just go back to WTO standards for every other country, and they basically said yes to everything. Boris
Yep.
Johnson famously said he felt bad about what happened in 1973 to
Mhm.
Australia because up to 1973, if you were an Australian citizen, you could just come and live here, like you used to be able to do as an EU citizen, and that stopped in 1973, where Commonwealth citizens from Jamaica, Guyana, New Zealand, Canada, other places could no longer just come here and stay as long as they wanted to. And he felt really bad about that. I bet he didn't, but he said he did.
Mm.
And so when the Australian trade minister, I think it was a guy called Alexander Downer, who's a bit of a dick, I don't know if it was him or someone else, was around, he said, I'll make it up to you by giving you the worst trade deal possible for us.
Yep. Signed on the back of bog roll.
Signed on the back of a bog roll. Oh my god! So now
Yeah.
what's happened? So they've so why cheese? Why beef? What's
Well,
what's
we've got to
what's the
talk
beef
about
with
the Australian deal
what's the beef
before
with
we
the
get
hard
to the
cheese?
Canada deal. Because the Australian deal gave the Australian farming industry, which is massive when it comes to its like meat output, absolutely massive. The farms in Australia are huge. Like compared to like the biggest UK farm, it does not even fit in like the biggest Australian farm. The Australian farm is massive compared to it. Um, so their beef output and just meat output in general is massive. So what is going to happen is now that they've got these concessions,
Yeah,
what was put in was a 15-year lead up time. So over time, these import tariffs on the beef are just going to get less and less and less over 15 years until they're gone. This has given essentially British farming and the British beef and meat industry a 15-year lead time before they go, we're being outperformed by cheaper imports, because that is what's going to happen. They're going to flood the
yeah,
UK with super meat, super cheap imports. This is what
yeah.
Australia does.
But why wouldn't
Now,
you?
yeah, exactly. Now, what a lot of people said was as soon as we gave away this, sweetheart deal to
Mm,
them in agriculture, everyone else was going to ask for it.
yeah,
And lo and behold, this is exactly what Canada has done. Give us the same, deal you've done with Australia on your beef allow us to import, because they use hormones in their beef growing process. We've banned that under EU rules and laws and regulations.
Yeah.
Now, we still do not know if that is the big stumbling block that was the thing that brought it down. A lot of people saying it are. And if you allowed this, this allows even more problems to UK farmers. In fact, UK farmers were celebrating when this deal collapsed on a massive level, saying how good it was that this deal fell through,
How
because they're
embarrassing.
all worried enough about the Australian and New Zealand trade deals. The last
Yeah.
thing they wanted was the Canadian deal. So UK farmers celebrating the fact that this deal fell through.
Wow.
But of course, we were trading with Canada on what was a rollover deal. So we used to be trading with them on the same terms of the EU deal. And the whole thing was, well, we're going to do this until we do a trade deal.
Yeah.
Now that has fallen through. We've had arguments over cheese. So the Canadians have put a 245% increased tariff on hard cheese into Canada. And now, of course, in response, I think we said, well, we're not going to allow, hormone treated beef into the UK. I also think it's a very shrewd move from Kimmy Badnock, because I think if that came out during an election year,
Yeah.
that would scupper them even more in the elections, especially from the farmer vote.
So I mean, but there's nothing to show for Brexit. Do you know what I mean? There's a series of bad trade deals, and this week the cost of food, fruit and veg, meat, bacon from the EU is
Denmark.
going to go up.
Yep.
The reason why it's going to go up is because there are checks. Well, no, there's no checks at the moment. There's just more paperwork. So what happens tomorrow night at midnight is there's going to be more paperwork, and as a result of that, if you're if you're an EU pig farmer, or you own a massive pig farm in Denmark, and you want to get your Danish bacon over here, because that we love to eat, you have to have a vet to check stuff out. And you didn't have to have that before when it was just going around the EU, but now you need a separate vet certificate to bring it into the UK. And then from April this year, we're actually going to be checking them.
Mm-hmm.
So paperwork first, and then we're actually going to be doing spot checks on.
Well, the paperwork's already technically in place, because it has to be in place 24 hours before. So technically, the paperwork checks for anything being shipped tomorrow has to already have been done today.
Oh my God.
So, yeah.
So how well is that going so far then?
We'll find out tomorrow.
Oh, shit.
Because even though you have to have the paperwork done 24 hours in advance, doesn't technically kick in until 12 o'clock tonight.
Right. Okay.
So as soon as it's 1 minute past 12,
yeah,
that's when it's all going to kick in. And you've got to have the paperwork, or else it's going to cause a lot of problems. I think
it is.
I think for the foreseeable future, we're going to see a lot of stories about, traffic at Dover, because there's already traffic problems at Dover.
Yeah.
This is something that a lot of people don't talk about, but it's still happening. If you live down south, if you live down Kent, the traffic problems that are going on. They just don't get reported anymore.
Well, I mean, if I was from Kent, I wouldn't report on it either, because I'll just feel so embarrassed that I'd voted for it. Do you know what I mean? I'd voted to make my life more wretched than it already was by living in Kent, surrounded by Tories. Ugh.
It's not just down south; it's places like Hull that could also really feel this as well.
Is that because of the cargo coming in on the ships?
Yep. Because to get to the port of Hull, you have to go through the city centre.
Oh, do you? Oh, that's clever.
Yeah.
Hull is actually technically below sea level, isn't it?
I think it is.
It's the only thing that Hull's got going for it.
Yeah.
Sorry to anyone in the chat who's from Hull. I don't mean
and it's got the deep. The deep's all right.
Yeah. Let's swap places. Right, we just swapped places. There you go. That was good. I can do that now. We can do all kinds of crazy stuff. If anyone gives a super chat, I've got a little animation that comes up and says super chat. I've got a different one actually because people were complaining that the one that I had when we were doing the Labour Social was giving people migraines and epileptic fits and things. So I've got another one. If you want to see
we need our own one for GEOSCOPE now.
You need yeah. No, I've got one. It's not that great. I prefer the other one, but never mind. Hughes says it's nice to be finally recognised. I spent 10 minutes saying hi to everyone on Max's live chat, then suddenly realised I wasn't showing up. I made a video about it just with theories. Why not? Okay. Well, Hugh, we can see you. It's okay.
Yeah, we can see you.
Well, we can't actually see you. We can read your comments. Badenoch couldn't negotiate her way out of a dustbin. Well, Badenoch is pretty. She's pretty awful, isn't she?
She's very bad.
Proper, like stories I've heard, like of people who've met her and known her. She's a nightmare.
This is it. If you look at like what Tories say about her, it's not very overly flattering. They're not very impressed with her.
No,
they say that she went from nothing, from pretty much obscurity into like quite a high office, and they're not impressed.
Someone's pointed out in the chat that most hulls are below sea level.
Oh,
good point.
Yeah.
Good point. The thing is, though, I mean, if I was in charge of Hull, which I believe to be at the wrong end of the M62, coming from Liverpool, I would demand that they change the name to Kingston, because it is actually called Kingston upon Hull. Oh, here we go. Jez Hunt wants to test out the super chat. Let's have a look. Ta-da! Super chat. Thank you. There you go. There's your little super chat there. It's covering my face. I might move it a little bit so it's not covering me. I don't want that. That's no good. But anyway, thank you very much, Jez, for the £2 super chat. No, other news that wasn't actually in the list that you sent me just before, because I think you sent me that list before this actually happened. But Doug Barrowman has appeared in court today in Spain to do with a completely different corruption charge, nothing to do with the PPE that he supplied, him and his awful wife. Oh, here we go. We've got another super chat. Pum Duff, thank you very much for the super chat. Super chat. Woo. Oh, it didn't come up back then. Are you going to play now?
Oh, there we go.
There you go. Hey, super chat. Thank you. I'll put it in between me and Ollie. F the Tories, not original, but that's how I feel, says Plum Duff. That's how I feel as well.
Yep.
So anyway, listen, Doug Barrowman, he could be facing something like 10 years in jail. Completely separate to this other the charges he's going to be facing in the UK. 5.5. So Doug Barrowman, 58, is facing 5.5, possible 5.5 jails in years. Years in jail.
He's facing 5.5 jails.
If found guilty of taking part in a scheme to defraud the Spanish government.
No one expects the Spanish Inquisition.
The plot thickens. Well, I didn't expect him. He seems like such a nice guy, completely on the level. Anyway, so that happened as well. Lawrence Fox also got his arse handed to him by a High Court judge yesterday, who said it wasn't acceptable for him to go around calling other people paedophiles, because it's not. But it was acceptable to call him a racist, because he is.
Yeah, I did see his little crying post he posted earlier on. It's just
he had a bit of a meltdown today. It was quite fun to watch in a kind of let's eat popcorn and watch a mind meltdown kind of way. He called Gary Lineker a racist. And a bunch of other people, including the woman he was trying to sue for calling him a racist. He called her a racist for trying to sue him. And apparently, when he was on the stand, he not only did the hacker twice badly, he also said the N-word because he thought, I know, I'll prove I'm not racist by saying the N-word in court. Which is a bit like going, I'll prove I'm not a murderer by stabbing the stenographer.
I bet his lawyers absolutely love him. That's like as a client.
Anyway, he reckons he's 2 million in the hole. I mean, bloody hell.
Oh, dear.
Someone did a thing about, because, he stood for London Mayor in a bus with, like, people with, like, who were chained up or something. And it said, Free London on the side of the bus. And apparently this sugar daddy who paid for all this gave him, like, £5 million. And someone worked out that Count Binface, like, vote for vote. Count Binface spent about a penny on each vote. Whereas he spent like literally £10,000 on each vote that he actually got.
Yeah.
It was painful. Um, uh, Jez says, "Poor Larry Foe. Billy Piper isn't coming back, mate. Just accept it." Something that our mate Aid was suggesting. We set up a crowdfunder for Lawrence Fox
It's
for his
all just
legal
a really
funds.
long attempt to try and get, you know.
No, and it channels all the
ex-wife
money to
back.
Billy. I like that. I like that plan. Anyway, so back onto what the things what we were supposed to be talking about today. So have we got any more news from Yemen? What's been happening in Yemen?
Oh, yes, this is interesting. Because I was wondering why China, when we talked about this, why China hadn't gotten involved.
Yes.
Because a lot of the ships and the cargo that is going through the Red Sea is from China.
Yeah.
So I was like, China's being very quiet about, Houthis attacking shipping and disrupting international world trade. Well, now China's finally got involved. And their target hasn't been the Houthis. They've put pressure on Iran.
That makes sense because they're funding the Houthis.
Yep. Because, like I say, the Houthis
sorry, not the Houthis. Oh my God, Houthi and the Blowfish. What's wrong with me? The Houthis. Jeez, meant to speak, Graham. Yeah. Anyway, go on. Sorry.
Like I say, the Houthis aren't building these drones and missiles like, Tony Stark in the first Iron Man film. They're getting all these stuff from Iran.
Yeah.
So the Chinese have now said, "Hey, knock it off." If Chinese business interests, shipping, or cargo is damaged or destroyed in any way, they've said that Iran is going to face economic consequences.
Ooh.
So they're now saying, "Hey, tell the Houthis to knock it off."
Yeah.
And it's the question of now, will Iran be able to rein the Houthis in? Because that's a pretty significant threat from China to say,
it is.
Your economy is going to suffer for essentially supplying the Houthis with weapons to attack shipping.
Yeah.
So we'll see what happens there, but that's a pretty significant threat from China.
Yeah. And also, I mean, Iran is in trouble with Pakistan at the moment because they've had some back and forths over the border with rockets and things like that. I mean, Iran seems to be doing everything in its power to sort of piss off everyone around it.
Yeah. And of course, Joe Biden, of course, there was a terrorist attack that killed US troops recently. You may remember when we were talking about Azerbaijan and Armenia going at it, where Azerbaijan killed Russian peacekeeping troops in the area and Russia basically did nothing about it, which I said showed a massive sign of weakness about how weak Russia was at the time. If this was the US, they would respond. Well, Biden said he's going to respond. We don't know how that is going to be. We don't know whether that's going to be more sanctions. We don't know whether that's going to be militarily or something like that. Maybe it'll be a special forces strike or something like that. We don't know at this moment in time. However, tomorrow is Wednesday. And as I said, when we do this show, every single time stuff happens on a Wednesday, the day after we do this show. Every single time.
I'm trying to remember it for the next week.
Yeah.
But I mean, so Biden has said that he's going to do something, but he hasn't actually spelt out what it is he's going to do, which is frustrating. But also, I mean, he's facing this threat from Texas, this joke threat from Texas, that they're going to secede from the Union. Now, I spent some time in Key West, which is also known as the Conch Republic, and they have a flag, and it says, "We seceded where others failed." But the reality is that no state has ever seceded from the Union of the United States because they're not allowed to. There's an urban myth that Texas is the only state that's allowed to secede in its constitution. It's not. None of them are. If they were allowed to secede, when South Carolina tried that in the 1850s, I think it was, that they wouldn't have had the Civil War, but they did have a Civil War. So
it'll be Burning Sherman again.
Yeah,
I don't
think it's allowed for a state
heading down south.
Unilaterally secede. So you think they're just causing trouble troubles for Biden? Is that the MO
Oh,
there? Headaches.
absolutely, they're causing trouble for Biden. Absolutely, because this plays so much into so many like Republican like fear mongering stuff, and they know at this upcoming election, what's Donald Trump really got to stand on? Like his economic record when he was president isn't overall good. He didn't really have a good response to COVID. Um, really, when it came to international politics, there's a lot of people asking the question now: is Kim Jong Un being more belligerent because he wants Trump to come in, and he would prefer President Trump so he can all be, buddy buddy again?
Yeah,
Um, on that parallel, but he's got nothing to run on, and now Texas. Because remember, this is the border issue that the Texas National Guard had set up razor wire in a river, and the U.S. State Department, or the border control department, which is like run by the U.S. government, not the state, has said, you've got to take that wire away, and the
yeah,
National Guard blocked them from doing so. And now we're in a point where judges have said, no, you can't set up that razor wire by the U.S. Supreme Court, which is, again, Republican controlled.
yeah. Massively
You
Republican controlled.
you cannot do this.
Yeah,
So this left Biden with what he should have done, and we'll talk about what he actually did, but what he should have done were just gone, okay, Scott Abbott, you might be, the governor of Texas, but I supersede you in, rank in military control, not only the US military, but National Guard as well. What I say goes. He could have very easily just say, I'm going to order the National Guard to remove that. And if
yeah,
they don't, they face a court martial because you're not following orders at that point.
yeah,
So it would be a court martial offense. Um, and he could have done that. That's what he should have done. However, instead
yeah.
he's allowed Republicans to get away with this, and now other southern like Republican governors are now saying, we stand with Texas, we stand with this. And part of the reason why this is going to, I think, become an issue and be a problem and be a good thing for Trump in a general election is that Texas and Arizona, for the past decade or so, have been slowly turning purple. Now, what that means in
Lack
US
of
terms,
oxygen to the brain.
well, what this means in US political terms is you have blue states and red states. So this state's Republican, this state's Democrat.
They do it the other way around. What's that about?
Yeah,
You know what else
I
they
know.
do the other way
It's,
around
it's
in
really annoying
America?
sometimes.
You know, if you're coming into America on a boat, right, on a sailboat, they switch the lights around. So everywhere in the world, it's red on the left as you're going in and green on the right, right? In America, they switch it around. And so, funny story, I was coming into Cancun in Mexico with, the Island of the Women, whatever it's called, which is just off Cancun. And with on a sailboat in the middle of the night with an American captain who decided that he would have the red the red buoys. They don't call them buoys; they call them buoys on the right, and we ran aground in the middle of the night. So there you go, funny little story. Anyway, so yes, they have the reds and the blues the way around. Everywhere else in the world, red means communism, socialism that way, and blue means fascism,
Yeah,
communism. No, conservatism. The other one.
yeah.
And then you have
Again,
green and
just to be different.
green and yellow in the
Yeah.
middle. Yeah. Anyway, go on.
But
So it's a
anyway,
purple
in
state.
US terms,
Demographically.
turning purple essentially means that these red states, the Democrat vote in these states is increasing. Now, why is this? Well, this is because they have developed cities in Texas and in Arizona that are now getting bigger and bigger. A lot more people, especially in the tech industry, are moving to these places. Austin is becoming more and more Democrat as time moves on. Oh, thank you very much
Thanks,
for the super
Richard,
chat.
for the £2 super chat. Are we going to mention the nitrogen execution? Yes, we should actually talk about that. Let's talk
Yeah.
about that in a moment. But go on, continue.
So this effectively means that the Republicans are worried that two of like their big states are going to turn Democrat. just through the number of votes for Democrat in these states just keeps on going and up. Now, their big justification for this is, oh, it's immigration. It's great replacement theory. The whole reason why they're bringing in immigrants into these states is to bring in more votes for Democrats. But you could easily say, why aren't the Republicans reaching out to immigrants as well? Maybe they could get these votes as well, but of course, can't do that. Racism, etc., etc. But yeah, that's the big problem. That's their big worry, that they're going to lose these states. There was a big worry last time that Texas or Arizona might go blue in the 2020 election, and that is still a big concern for Republicans going into this election as well. So we'll see what
Arizona
happens.
did go blue.
No, I
Presidential.
think it was Georgia.
Oh, Arizona did as
It was
well.
Georgia. Georgia was the surprise one that went blue. But you might be right, because I know it might have been Arizona that went blue.
Blue 2020. But Arizona, yeah, it looks like it did. I'm pretty sure it did. United States presidential election in Arizona. The winner was Joe Biden with 49.36% of the votes. So he got 11 of the electoral votes, and Donald Trump got none because he's a loser. Yep. But yeah, so Arizona it's almost 50-50. It was very close. It was a very closely fought thing. It came down to just 10,000 votes or so in the end, like literally 10,000 votes out of over 3 million cast. So yeah, you're right. I mean the thing with the Republicans and the Tories over here, who are currently doing a number on us with the the overseas registration for voting. Have you heard about this? They're going to allow people voting by proxy in the UK. So you'll be able to vote for someone who lives abroad. You'll be able to vote on their behalf. And the Tories are really
I feel quite strongly about this. I don't think you should be allowed to do that. I mean, even though I know that a lot of people are going to say, oh, we're really upset about Brexit, so it's going to be like a big punishment to the Tories. I feel that once you've stopped living in this country, unless you are living in the country at the time of general election, you don't get a vote. Yeah. I feel very strongly about that. But and it's, as the Electoral Commission has said, it's very hard to actually police this.
Yeah.
It's really difficult to actually verify if someone's voted or not.
My controversial view is I think 16 and 17-year-olds should be allowed to vote, but pensioners shouldn't be allowed to vote unless they vote for Labour. It's very simple. You want to vote? Is it important to you? Go to vote for Labour. Oh, you don't want to vote for Labour? Sorry, you can't vote. That wouldn't be very democratic, though, would it? Should we? Yeah. I mean, you're gonna see. Oh, we've got another super chat. We're doing well with the super chats. I'm glad I made this little animation here. Thank you, Emma, for the super chat. Thank you. MAGA is so done. They're flailing around like the Tories. Trump is yesterday's news. The Democrats will go and vote. Fingers crossed, Emma. I really hope that's the case.
Yeah, I've said this every time this comes up. My worry is turnout. It's the 2020 election was the highest turnout in an American presidential election for both parties. If the Democrats do not turn out to vote, Trump will win the election. And my worry is that there's a lot of very disheartened Democrats in this, saying, well, Biden hasn't really done anything. When actually, exact opposite is true. He has done a lot of stuff. But we'll see. But it's my worry.
Nature and politics abhor a vacuum. And because Biden hasn't been out on the telly every freaking day doing a press conference. Remember, Trump used to do press conferences.
Oh, yeah.
He was crap at them, but he did them. Do you know what I mean? He'd go out, you'd see him all the time. He was always in the freaking news. You couldn't turn the TV on or go on the BBC website without seeing his ugly, bloody mug in front of you. He knew that he had to stay at the forefront of everyone's mind. Whereas Biden likes to get stuff done, so he's sort of like working away in the background, actually doing the job of being president instead of playing golf and being horrible. I wish he'd get out more. I wish we'd see Biden more, and he would go out and refute what Trump has been saying and prove Trump wrong. The funny one for me, they go on about Biden's age. And it's like, you do
Mm.
realize if Trump gets elected in his final year in office, he will be older than Biden is now. So
Yeah.
Anyway, Hugh is asking where's Super Tansky. No, she's all right, but she's just had a lot of things all at once this month. But hopefully next month, she'll be back in the driving seat. She's been doing still a lot of a little dystopia warning videos. So if you want to watch them, please subscribe to her channel or follow her on TikTok. But we're hoping to maybe have her on the Labour Social on Friday, and we're going to see if we can do the swear jar next Monday. But hopefully we'll be seeing a little bit more of Tan in February than we have done in January. But yes, it's nothing major. It's just it seems like a bunch of stuff has all come up at once, and it's she's having to deal with that rather than actually, come and talk to us. Idiots.
Yeah.
Yeah. Anyway, so where were we? We were talking about nightmare for Biden. Can we talk a little bit about this execution?
Yes. What happened was lethal injections were banned.
No, they
And
weren't
it
banned.
was actually, no, it's actually a combination. It was lethal
They weren't banned.
injections
They
were also
couldn't.
becoming banned, but they'd also started to have trouble
They couldn't get the
actually
chemicals.
being able to get the substances to do the lethal injection as well.
Ooh, we've got another super chat, mate.
Nope.
Thank you, Emma. Again. Woo! Another super chat. The message is out. Dark Brandon is kicking ass and he's been endorsed by major unions. I like
Yeah.
Emma's attitude. Emma's got this positive attitude. Like, but he's gonna have Trump's gonna have his ass handed to him. But yeah, so
that's actually something worth talking about because people might
What?
not know this. One of the biggest unions in America, their boss came out and said his opening statement is Donald Trump is a scab. And like in
wow.
union terms, being called like a scab is like the worst thing to be called. So for a union boss to come out and say that is very strong language from a union boss. And it is partly because Biden has been doing some absolutely fantastic work in helping unions have more power, have more bargaining power, not being able to be subject to like union busting by these big corporations. So that's one area where Biden has done a lot of really good work. So the fact that he has had that endorsement, and honestly, if more union leaders would come out and do that, I think you would see a lot more. I'd be less worried. Because as I said, I'd be less worried about that turnout. And I think that will be a good thing to say, oh, actually, yeah, that's a good point. He has done that. So I think that will be good to see the unions have more calls to like support Biden, support the Democrats, and call that of Donald Trump, because especially in the Rust Belt, in Michigan, Wisconsin, and I can't remember what the third one is.
Pennsylvania.
Those were the states that went red. I think those were the states that went red for Trump in 2016.
Yeah.
And it was all the auto car workers.
Michigan went red, didn't it? And that was a big shock because that was
that was the big shock of the night.
Democratic state. I think that was the only state that didn't turn red in the 1984 election in Reagan's second term. I think it was the only one. Like every other state in America turned red for that election, except for that one. And Trump turned it red by appealing to people's the left behind, to people who feel aggrieved at the way modern life has moved on and things have changed, and they don't.
Yes,
like
I
the fact
love
that things
clean
have
coal.
changed. Yeah. So in the same way that Brexit appealed to people who were made to feel aggrieved. So you had places that have been effed over by the Tories in the 1980s, like mining villages, like where I live in Durham now. People voting the Tories, voting for Brexit, voting for the Tories because they've been manipulated into thinking that was going to somehow make things better for them. And it's demonstrably made things worse, obviously. But yeah, so Alabama couldn't get hold of the chemicals it needed to do a lethal injection. I think the electric chair is not allowed to be used anymore because it is a cruel and unusual punishment, something that is banned by the US Constitution. That's why in America in the 70s and 80s, the use of the death penalty was suspended across the country because it was seen to be cruel and unusual, because it is. It's cruel, and there's like only a handful of countries around the world that still carry out the death penalty. So this guy was injected with nitrogen, effectively pushing the oxygen out of his system. It took him 25 minutes to die, writhing around on a gurney. And if that's not a cruel, unusual punishment, I really don't know what is. What's going through the heads? Like,
Yeah,
this is going to stop him.
This is the thing. I think when you talk about the death penalty in America, it's depending where you go, state by state. It's like, oh well, it's very biblical. It's oh well, it's an eye for an eye type thing. If you killed someone, then you lose your life. But
it's Christian, isn't it? Not Jewish.
Hmm?
Jesus said, "Turn the other cheek."
Well, yeah. Hence why I said it's very biblical.
Oh, the Old Testament, the OG of the Testaments.
So it is very, very much I think that's where it's sort of the belief for it really sort of stems from. But as Ian Hislop rightly called out Priti Patel when she was making the comeback for the death penalty at the time, when you've looked into some of these cases, turns out some of these people who were actually innocent that got murdered by the death penalty, they were innocent. And it's the same in America as well. Through the increase of technology and things like that, they found that people, oh no, they were actually innocent, and it's
So the murder rate in the US is about 5 in every 100,000. In the UK, it's 1. So they have a murder rate 5 times ours, proportionately for their population, and they have the death penalty in many states. It's not a deterrent. In the same way that jail's not a deterrent. Being threatened with being sent to Rwanda is not a deterrent to people coming over in small boats. If it was, they would stop.
The US jail system is a nightmare.
Yeah.
If you want a very clear example why we should not privatize our prisons, just look at American jails. It is it's a nightmare of a system.
And the judges get backhanders, don't they? So they send more kids to these jails, filling them up, so they have to build more.
And then more people become criminal from being in jail.
Yeah, you thought George Amundsen was a racket. This is another level. Emma, thank you very much for the super chat. Woo! Another super chat of Emma. Really appreciate that. I hope that super chat graphic is better than the other one. But Emma says, if I'm wrong, I'll eat your hat. Emma, don't eat my hat. That's like if you're wrong and Trump gets in, I'll be absolutely devastated that Trump has been reelected, and then you'll come along and eat my hat. The only thing that'll keep me going in this insane world. Oh, please don't eat my hat. Oh, there we go. And we've got One Angry Pagan. Thank you very much for the super chat, One Angry Pagan, saying that the government of Israel equals the Daleks of Skaro. They're getting worse. Well, yes, they seem to be roaming around Gaza, just screaming exterminator everything that moves, including
there was
women,
footage today that came out of
children holding white flags, hankies, their own hostages. They've been shot as well, holding white, just anything that moves.
Did you see the footage today from one of the hospitals?
No.
They'd stormed it disguised as doctors.
Jesus
like Israeli troops had
Christ.
disguised themselves as doctors and stormed the hospital.
Is this the moment where they're in the bunker and it's like that comedy sketch by Mitchell and Webb where he's like, "Are we the baddies?"
Yeah.
The bit where they turned over a graveyard claiming they were looking for a tunnel and they just dug up a load of bodies, like freshly buried bodies. I don't. I mean, look, Hamas's MO in all this was to make Israel look like a bunch of dicks to the rest of the world. And they've been very, very successful at doing that because Israel had just walked straight into that bear trap and just gone, all right, yeah, we will literally not have any friends left at the end of this. And they're lashing out at Biden.
News of David Cameron today as well.
David Cameron has said
we're going to prepare. The way should be set for a Palestinian state.
Yes, the UK which is something that should have been done 20 fucking years ago, right? So we should have recognized Palestine as an independent state. We've been going on about this two-state solution
Mm.
since the mid-90s, for Christ's sake. All right, okay, put your money where your mouth is. Recognize Palestine as a state,
Yeah.
and you have negotiations with the other Arab countries, and they recognize Israel as a state. There you go. There is your first solid step that can't be revoked to a two-state solution, if that's what you
Yeah.
want.
And bear in mind, countries like Israel and Saudi Arabia have been putting forward proposals based on that, of making sure that the Palestinians do have a future state. So they've been doing a lot of work to try and sort of argue for that. And I think that's very, very good for that, because that's what's been needed since the beginning. You can't just call for a ceasefire. You've got to go, well, okay, there's going to be a ceasefire. How are we going to make sure this is a lasting ceasefire? How do we make sure we achieve lasting peace? How do we go forward on there? And we are now starting to see the beginnings of this. What happens after all this? And that is very, very good. So Israel and Saudi Arabia
Hopefully
have, like I say,
Netanyahu.
put forward, ideas of what to do. For example, they've said that um, them, Egypt, and I think the other sort of Gulf states are actually going to fund the reconstruction of Gaza, so that
Yeah.
Israel doesn't have to do it. Which I think is wrong. I think Israel should contribute in some way
Yeah,
to
I
that.
do as well.
Um,
They
but
reckon that
also in Israel,
half the
this is
buildings
some.
have been destroyed or are damaged. Half the buildings that exist in Gaza. There's so much, just so much ammunition, rockets, RPGs, everything being fired in that area at the moment. It's horrific. And
Mm,
Israel, like, whatever reason they had, whatever, not reason, justification, I should say, whatever justification they had has been lost now. They haven't got a justification for
yeah,
doing what they're doing right now. And they're turning the world against them because they're
yeah.
like, this is too
They've
much.
lost
People
any
can't
moral
stomach it.
authority they really
Yeah.
had.
I'd very much like to see Benjamin Netanyahu in the dock in The Hague for war crimes.
I think he's going to end up there, because the whole reason why this has been so, why this happened, why there was such a violent sort of pushback, was because of Benjamin Netanyahu. There is
Yeah.
a coalition of right wing extremists, and they couldn't decide who would make the best prime minister. So Netanyahu came in and said, "Look, let me be your guy. My big MO is, Israeli security." But of course, the Hamas attack happened on his watch, which sort
Yeah.
of blows his whole, I'm the big dog of, like, Israeli security, blows it on his entire watch. And remember, he's a very corrupt politician. If he
Yeah.
loses this seat, he is going to go to prison for corruption charges. So
Yeah.
he's also fighting for that. You are seeing big pushes in Israel now. um, More and more people in Israel are starting to realize, oh, doing this, it was a bad move, because it is not going to secure long-lasting peace.
Yeah.
And they are hearing stories, more and more people being mobilized, realizing what they're doing, sending stories back. Um, Social media, particular in Israel, because, like I say, the media in Israel is very, very right-wing controlled. They're not reporting what's really going on, but social media and all the stuff that's going on there. You saw the families of hostages storm into parliament, into a parliamentary session, and lock
Yeah.
it down and stop it from continuing, because they were that angry about it, protesting about it. So there's so much stuff going on in Israel that they are now trying to do to bring this to a halt as well, which I think should also be reported. But not a lot of people are talking about it, because, well, Israel's very desperate to say it. Everyone in Israel's behind this, when in reality it's
Yeah.
really not.
They're not. They're really not. And yeah, that is worth mentioning. So, I mean, we're hopefully not going to be in this for much longer. I mean, this isn't a situation like we've got in eastern Ukraine, where they
Yeah.
seem to have come to a stalemate. This is a case of this war is going to be over when Israel just stops what it's doing, and there's going to be more and more international pressure coming down on Israel to
Mm.
just pack it the fuck in, because this is just. It reminds me very much of the Western response to September the 11th, which again was disproportionate and resulted in the deaths of hundreds of thousands of people who didn't need to be dead in any way, shape, or form. The the punishment. I mean, the 9/11's the maddest thing ever, because the people who were punished were the Afghanis, who, fair enough, the Taliban were a terrible government, but it was the Saudis who organised it. It was the Saudis who paid for it. The Saudis who covered it up. I mean, it was a Saudi master plan, and 15 of the 19 hijackers were from Saudi Arabia. They weren't from Afghanistan. But you could sort of squint your eyes and go, well, they had the terrorist training camp there, so we can blame them. But Iraq had nothing to do with it at all. And again, it's terrorism. This is the difference between like justified, like stepping in when someone's being mugged and stopping them from being mugged, or seeing someone being mugged across the street and then punching someone on your side of the street, thinking that's going to stop the mugging, and you're like, hang on, what? We've got to have justice. We've got to punish someone, anyone, doesn't matter who. And it's just, it's painful to watch. But yeah, I think there's definitely war crimes that have been committed in Gaza by the IDF, and hopefully there's enough media there, not media as in journalists and things, because they're under fire as well, but people with camera phones and things like that recording what's happening in there, and they'll get that out, and these people can be brought to some kind of justice. But yeah, but anyway, yes, back on to where were we? America.
Do you want to talk about Putin's crazy Alaska dream?
Alaska dream. Because Alaska used to be part of Russia, and it was sold to America for about $8 million back in the 1850s, was it? Tell us more,
just
Ollie.
2 years after the Civil War, I think it was, when it was done. So yeah, this is a weird one, and it's difficult to, and we'll talk why Putin has done this afterwards. But what essentially has happened here, Putin has signed a new law. He said, right, any ex-Russian property that is in former Soviet Union territory, Russian imperial territory, no, that's still Russian, and we are going to send people out to catalog, search, and potentially either occupy or find some way to extract that money from that property that's in another country. And this reaches all the way to like Eastern Germany, because they're talking like ex-Warsaw Pact countries. If the Soviet Union built like a factory, or they built a housing block in like an Eastern European country, well, that apparently now belongs to Russia.
But the stuff they built was shite. It was brutalist, Cold War, concrete, soulless junk that could have been built by an AI who was having a particularly miserable day.
There's a fun video I want to point people to, because it just came out today. It's Animarchy, and he does a lot about sort of talking about sort of aircraft, and he did a video about why Russia's 5th generation aircraft are just so awful. But to get to that point, you've got to talk about almost the history of like Russian aviation. And it's an hour and a half video, but it is worth a watch, because hey, you're seeing Russia have supply problems now. You're seeing the exact same problems that plague what is going on in Ukraine to what happened in the Second World War as well, and even before that. So definitely give it a watch. It's well worth it. Yeah.
So I mean, more saber rattling. Do you think that we're going to be? Because when I was in Ukraine last month, we got talking to a police officer when we were crossing back over the border, and he was saying to us, we were sort of translating on the phone, back and forth using Google Translate, and he was saying to us that he's going to get called back up to the front in a few months' time, because it's like 6 months on, 6 months off. And when he's off, he's a police officer, and then when he's back, he's with his comrades fighting against the Russians. And he said he reckons it was going to go on for another 5 years. And his mate there was like nodding away, going, "Yeah, 5 years." And that was the Ukrainians. They don't see a quick end to this. But,
no, I think they are taking the long view of this. They are really taking the long view
Yeah.
because they got really lucky early on when they retook Kherson.
Yeah.
Because we all remember the lines looked stagnant, and then you had those over a course of a couple of days, these slow but sure Ukrainian advances in like northeastern Ukraine, and then the entire Russian line just broke,
Yeah.
and they went fleeing all the way back across the border because they'd broken them that efficiently. In the south, it's a different story. The Russians have really dug in, and I think they're really recognizing that if they are going to get the Russians out, they need to really break through these Russians. And
Yeah.
one of the things that we haven't really seen come into play is air power,
Well,
because Ukraine doesn't really have too much of an air force.
no.
Russia has a very large air force, but shockingly, we have not seen it come into play. We have not seen them try to establish air
Well, I'm guessing
superiority,
that they can't.
which
They can't escape
yeah, because they literally can't do it. It's you've got now Western
So
air defenses.
what's the
You've got
channel? Someone's asked what the channel was that you mentioned just before.
Anamarchy.
Anamar Keep. How's that
It's
spelled?
yeah, hold on, let me just grab it.
While you're doing that, I'm going to say thank you to David Faulkner for the super chat. Woo! 38 Hong Kong dollars. When are we going to view the value of human life equally? That's a very good question. It was something that I would hope to see in my lifetime, but I'm 45 next month, and I'm kind of like losing all will to, you know, losing all hope, Ollie. I thought things were getting better, slowly but surely, but it
It's
turns out
honestly
they're
it's
not.
one of these things really it's really difficult when you look at you know from from a from like a foreign policy point of view. I do agree, every life is a human life, but you've got a problem where like the Houthis, who on their flag is like written death to America, death to like the Western infidels. They're not really in it for the Palestinian people as much as they
No.
like would say, "Oh yeah, we're trying to help out,
Well, it's
the
like Trump's
Palestinian
not in
people."
it for the American people. Like
Yeah,
Putin's
exactly.
not in it for the Russian people. As One Angry Pagan's pointing out, Russia's having major heating crisis right now.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah,
They can't get the resources in.
yeah, and that's even more insane because Russia is like a petro state. Russia
Yeah.
is like all about its oil and natural
Well,
resources. But if
what about Venezuela? Venezuela. When I
mm,
went there, you could fill up your tank at a petrol station. You could fill up your tank for like, I don't know. It was about $1. It was about $1, literally for to fill. I mean a tank. I mean like a Sherman tank. I mean like a Panzer tank, and it was about $1. It was
mm,
ridiculously cheap, and it's like this petro state, and yet they've got no money, and they've got no food, and they've got
well,
like literally hundreds of thousands
yeah,
of
I've just put it in the
refugees who
chat
have left,
there.
and they're now working in other countries.
I've just put it in the chat there now. Where you can find the video. Like I say, it's just been released today, so you should be able to find it really easily
Annie
on the
Markey
channel. But it's
history.
very, very good. Yeah,
Okay,
very good.
I will
Um,
look that up. But yeah, go on.
but I think why this has happened is because of the sanctions. Russia's only customers who are buying oil from them now are China and India, and they have been buying it at knockdown prices because of the sanctions. So it seems that in order to try and help fund this war, Putin has oversold like the oil that would normally be saved for like winter to heat people's houses.
Yeah,
So it's yeah, there's honestly I think more stuff I think still to come, and the big thing that we need to look at now is how can we really put the squeeze on Russia? What can we do to really do it? And it's sanctions. We
yeah,
need to
sanctions.
really start
Yeah,
bottlenecking their supply
and
chains,
we can't just go
really
after.
put the screws on sanctions on
We
them.
can't just go after one Russian oligarch and say Roman Abramovich. Okay, we're going to take Chelsea off you. Got to go after them all and get strip Lebedev off his titles, strip him of his newspaper titles as well.
Mm,
Get him out the House of Lords. Even put him in jail. Put him on a show
mm,
trial. See how they like it. Oh, you like your show trials, don't you? Well,
mm.
I'll tell you what. We'll release Lebedev when you release Navalny. There you go. Good deal for
And
you.
And I know this will probably have consequences as well, but I think all the European intelligence and security agencies should get together and go, right, we're now going to overtly and covertly start sabotaging Russian supply chains if we know it's going through our country, or if it's
Yeah.
coming through us, well, that shipment's going to get stopped. Oh, how long are you going to have to wait for? I don't know, but you're waiting here. If it's going to Russia, you're waiting here indefinitely till we say till you say you can go. There's a ton of stuff that like security agencies could, I think, really start to do
Yeah.
in
Well,
this,
also,
and
you
that would
know,
hurt them even more.
yeah, on in terms of the internet, I mean, America, the internet was built by the American military. Do you
Mm,
know what I mean? The fact that like they can't do more because
yeah,
the Russians have been doing stuff to sabotage our democracy in our countries for years, and they seem
yeah.
to be getting away with it by the security forces, by the the
This is it.
intelligence forces,
We should just do this back to
because
them.
yeah,
Russia's
they're
got an
too
election
busy
this year.
concentrating on Islamic terrorism and
Yeah,
not looking at the fact that the Russians are trying to subvert, well, have successfully subverted our democracy. But before we go on, Alexander Campbell, thank you for the super chat and happy birthday for tomorrow. Many happy
yes, happy
returns
birthday.
and all that jazz. Samuso86 says, would the Cannes UK trade agreement mean we can live in Canada? Looking for light at the end of the tunnel. This is the
No.
Canada, Australia, New Zealand, UK trade deal. I doubt it because it would have to be reciprocal, and we don't like foreigners coming here. I don't know. I really
Yeah.
doubt it. If you want your EU passport back, and you can move to Ireland, you stay in Ireland for a few years. You can get yourself an Irish passport. You can live in Ireland. That's no problem. We've got free
Yep.
movement to Ireland, and yeah, stay there for a few years, and you can get an Irish passport,
Yep.
and then
Or
you'll be an EU
marry
citizen
someone
again.
from Ireland. You know.
Or marry one of the gorgeous people from Ireland with the amazing Irish accent and their love of crack and also a song in their hearts. I've never met anyone from Ireland who can't sing.
Yep.
It's like going to karaoke in Ireland's actually a pleasure rather than a chore. Hughes says they used to dig coal like peat around me once. Follow the outcrop seams from the riverbeds. Evidence all over. During the last 1,000 years ago, it started to be done. Rather wood domestically. I don't know what that means, Hugh, but thank you. We got Carson says the light at the end of the tunnel is a train most of the time.
Yeah.
Moranto T33. I'm the only Scouser who has no Irish family. FFS. Mate, I do have Irish ancestry, but it only goes to your grandmother or grandfather, and it was my great grandfather and great grandmother. Actually, it might have been my great great grandfather and grandmother who came over from Ireland because I've told the people on this channel this before. They're probably sick of hearing it, but she was a Catholic and he was not just a Protestant, but he was actually a member of the Orange Order. So they eloped. They ran away together to Liverpool. Liverpool. With all the Americans who couldn't afford the passage, and then with all the Australians who didn't get caught. But yeah, FTUM Shook says Shane McGowan couldn't sing to save his life. Bless him. That's true. However, he was born in Tunbridge Wells, so that's what happens. You lose the gift of the gab, the singing gab. Anyway, right, we've got over time. Ollie, was there anything you wanted to say that we haven't mentioned? Lawrence Fox, Barrowman arrested, Alaska. Nitrogen being used to execute someone. I mean, that must be a war crime or something. We take that to the Hague.
Yeah, it's very inhumane. We'll see if that sticks. I have a feeling that's not going to stick somehow.
Wow. Can we just say a little bit about the death penalty before we go? Not only is the death penalty absolutely abhorrent, not only do we have Keir Starmer to thank as a humanitarian lawyer who went around the world arguing against states using the death penalty, so much so that there's only a handful of countries around the world now that still have the death penalty on the books, and even fewer who still carry it out. And they're generally not company that you want to keep. It's Iran and Somalia and Saudi Arabia and places like that. But not only does it not make any kind of moral sense, not only does it not work as a deterrent to people murdering each other, it just doesn't. Also, it costs an absolute fortune. But am I right in thinking the guy that they killed in Alabama had been on death row since 1989? Is that
Yep.
right? He was
Yeah,
convicted
if you
in
get the death penalty, you've got to be
1989.
like they wait like 10, 20 years before you actually get the death penalty. It's ridiculous.
So here you go. Here's your economic argument for the Tories in your family. It's cheaper to leave people to rot in jail for the rest of their life than it is to execute them. Because if you execute them, they are going to appeal time and time and time again. And even if they find a lawyer who takes their case pro bono, they're still going to have to pay for the court time. They're still going to have to pay for the judge's time and the stenographer and the court officials and everybody else involved in the court system. And you know how expensive that is. Loser Fox was whinging about losing £2 million today, which was entertaining. But that money can't be paid by the prisoner because they're a prisoner. So who do you think ends up paying that? The taxpayer. It's just like, I mean, even if you were so amoral that you thought that it was okay for the state to murder people, which it isn't, you've got that argument to go and hang on, but it doesn't make any economic sense either. And I find this with Brexit. I find this with, the Tories in general. It doesn't make any moral sense, and it doesn't make any economic sense.
Economic sense either.
Make it make sense, Ollie. Make it make sense. Plum says, life under the Tories is like a death penalty. Yeah, it is. But it's soon coming to an end.
Yep.
New polls out this week, that they're not narrowing the gap, put it that way.
If you want something funny, on Conservative Home, David Davis wrote an entire cope piece about how the Conservatives should just hold their nerve and that we've all really got to get around Rishi Sunak. But of course, what did he go and do against Theresa May when he was told, you've got to rally round Theresa May, you've got to get behind Theresa May? He didn't do that at all. So
David Davis.
Yeah.
Was he the guy who stood up in Parliament and said that Boris Johnson needs to go now?
Yep.
Oh, I remember that. Anyway, there's no loyalty like Tory loyalty.
Yeah, it's
literally is no loyalty.
Yeah. It's hilarious because David Davis is like the archetypical Tory who did not rally behind the leader every single time.
Indeed. Okay, Ollie, thank you so much for joining us tonight here on GEOSCOPE on Labour Social. Thanks to everyone who joined in the chat. Thanks to everyone watching. Thanks to all the super chats. It's fantastic today.
Yes.
And I'll be back in the morning at 9:30 with Morning Brew, live and interactive. So if you'd like to join us for that, you are very welcome to. And until next time, I'll say hello, good evening, welcome, and goodbye.